Hey, this is a Snuck game versus LS Evil Pug. Probably either platinum or diamond. Snuck is like number one platinum or something. So lots of diamond opponents. TVT, obviously. I suspect that this is a game that I saw on your stream actually, where your opponent just does this fast expand, you fast expand, except he gets double gas and starts pumping tanks, whereas you get no gas and start making marines. And the build you're going for is the same build that I always use, which is a heavy emphasis on marines before you go into really late medevacs and then even later tanks. And in order to resist a reasonable tank count with pure marines, you gotta catch them unsieged, and you gotta have a big enough army. So, I didn't get the glorious chance of seeing the replay when I saw it on your stream, but it was pretty clear that you had 1,000 gas in the bank, and you had a bigger army than him. But instead of just stimming and A moving with a reasonable spread, you did some stutter step micro, which was just silly. Never stutter step against tanks. Just stim, A move, and then grab a tiny chunk of your units and move them off to a side or something. Or stop looking at the fight altogether, either way. So here we go. I think this is the end of the game coming up. Again, look at your gas is 800, so obviously bad things. You guys are even on supply. You're even on... Actually, you're a little bit behind on army supply. This is a vulnerability of any double upgrade build. I mean, think about... We beat Protosses all the time because they get double ups, right? And the ups haven't completed. Oh no. So, it's just a vulnerability in your build that right before these upgrades finish, you're going to have some problems. Also, you pre-built the turret ring, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have, but just recognize that when you make a turret ring and he doesn't, that puts him a little bit ahead. And much more importantly, the whole time I was watching it in your stream, I was like, why are there 27 workers there and only 16 up here? And you vary almost every game I watched of yours. You have a big problem with dropping mules. And one of the reasons... Okay, so I'd say the biggest reason you win almost every game I lose at almost every game I watch where you lose is that your money piles up. You have a bunch of money that you can't spend, and you're like, well, all of a sudden I have a bunch of money I can't spend. And that's because for the first 10 or 12 or even 15 minutes, you're looking at your base, you're dropping mules consistently, your money's coming in at an even pace, and you're spending it at an even pace, and your money stays low. But then all of a sudden you're fighting, and you forget to drop mules. And then you come over and drop 4 or 6 mules at once, which is exactly what you should do. But now your income has suddenly jumped to double what it was. So your infrastructure is there ready to handle the 0 mule income that you have, but all of a sudden you have double that income because you dropped all your mules at once. And so your cash just piles up. And then you never build the additional buildings you need to spend that additional cash, and you just have this huge bank for the rest of the game. So learning to drop mules consistently will really help you not build up a bank. Never having idle buildings is so unbelievably crucial in every way. I know that there's about to be a battle happening, so it's easy to lose focus, but if you leave these buildings idle, you're gonna lose. So right now, you should have, theoretically, 4, 8, 12, 1,200 more minerals than you have. Which would explain why your gas is so high, right? Because you don't have the minerals associated to spend the gas, right? Like, and that's just because you haven't dropped mules. That's $1,200 of undropped mules plus $1,200 in your bank means $2,200 of unspent money. And your opponent did drop mules. He doesn't have that same problem, and he's spent most of his money. So that's a big difference. Also, a big difference you're always going to find is that when you're better than your opponent at keeping up on workers, but you don't take a third base to make those workers viable, and I'm not saying you should have taken a third base, right? There's a big battle coming. Don't spend the money on a third base, but just recognize it's just like the turret ring. It's something that you did that's good, but just recognize that by doing it, you're putting yourself behind for a short time, and you're going to be way ahead after this short time. So you built 10 more workers than him. That's another $500 on top of the $2,400 from your other build vulnerabilities. That's just not helping you here. Also, obviously, $400 into this CC is another 400. So I think, all in all, you had about $3,300 that was just wasted in reference to this battle. Not wasted like in reference to the strategic long-term game, but wasted in reference to the tactical, short-term, immediate battle. And that said, you still should have won this battle. It's 1-0 against 1-0, and you have 42 Marines, whereas he has 25, 6, 7 Marines. 42 against 27, you should easily crush this. He does have 2 tanks, but that's the equivalent of like 6 more Marines, so his army equivalency is like 32 against 42. You have like a 10 Marine superior army in this local battle. Now, he has a bigger army than you overall, but a lot of his army isn't with it because you have the defender's advantage. So you catch him unsieged, you stim in, you have a bigger army. Why don't you win this fight? And again, we should take this to the unit map tester just so that I can prove my point rather than just saying it. But why don't you win this fight? Look at this. This Marine, way closer than 5 range to this Marine. If you just A-moved, these guys would have stopped here and formed an arc around these 3 units. He would have only had 7 units shooting while you had most of your army shooting, and then you would have crushed your way through this. A-move is designed to be perfect, except for clumping. And stutter stepping is designed to get rid of clumping as a problem. But with Marines, when you stim them, they're shooting every 0.6 seconds. You can't stutter step that fast. It's physically impossible. And not only can't you, but you're not going to. So when you do these stutter steps like that, that's a really quick stutter step. And it's a good stutter step. And I don't want you to be ashamed of that stutter step. That's the best you can do as far as a stutter step goes. That's the best anyone can do. But it's still cutting the DPS of your whole army for one shot. And then this one particularly, you just cut about 2 more shots. And that one you cut about 3 more shots, 4 more shots. So like throughout the course of that battle, you cut a lot of shots. And there was no point. These stutter steps are hurting you, and they're not helping you. The only time you want to stutter step is if you've got so much bigger of an army than him that it doesn't matter. Or like in the extremely rare case, and I don't even want to mention this because even then it's probably not worth it, but in the extremely rare case when you can get your whole army so that it's not hittable by siege tanks. But don't even try to do that, because like say you have 5 Marines against 2 siege tanks and you can stutter step to make the Marines unshootable, that's going to save you a total of 2 siege tank shots, and that's not a big deal. The numbers were kind of bad. 5 Marines against 2 siege tanks, that was a stupid thing to say. But, 15 Marines against 2 siege tanks. Anyway, if you'd A-moved this battle, you would have won it. But on top of that, your build, just with all these unspent mules and idle racks for a long time, and turret rings being built, and upgrades advantage over him, doing double ups instead of single ups like he did. And having 10 more workers than him and pre-building this CC before the big fight, all of those things added up to about $3,000 of army that you should have had over him, theoretically, if you just mirrored his build back at him. So don't worry too much about losses like this, where you lose because of your turret ring and because of your double ups. Like they're going to be so rare that it's not a big deal. But do worry about losses like this, where you lose and you look back and you have a ton of mule energy. Anytime you look and have a ton of mule energy, or even, just as bad if you had no mule energy, but you had 6 mules up at once. It's just going to give you this giant unspendable bank. It's not, it'll even out over the course of 10 minutes, but it's not going to even out in the short term, and the short term is all that matters when you lose one big fight. So, again, 48 Marines against 27 and 2 tanks. I totally want to try that. Let's play some arcade games. Browse? No. There's no create button? Recently played? Unit tester. Pla the unit tester. So because you're both 1.0 upgrades, we don't have to do upgrades at all. We can just ignore them. All right. 48 against. We could just click the all upgrades button, right? Give me a better terrain. Start, all upgrades, all energy. Like, it's weird to think that you actually had this many Marines, because in the game, it was like a clump about this big, and then a little clump about this big, and when they're all clumped up like this, it looks like a much smaller army. I need the terrain was important. Nah. Ramp? No. Path? No. It's hard, you can't duplicate the terrain, I guess. Whatever. Okay, so he's coming at you. And you engaged with some units and then some more units, but you should have just had all your units there. That was another part of what went wrong. But he's engaging in this way, so that when he first showed up, he only had some of his units available for combat. Now, if you both stim an A move, then he sieges up. You can see that by the time the tanks fire their first shot, his Marines are all dead already. And like, I haven't microed this battle at all, and you just easily win it. So what happened instead of this was this, where they come over here and you come over here and then you come over and join it, and you're like, I need to get closer to the tanks. Oh, I forgot to siege up the tanks, but anyway. You can see how every time I stutter step, he gets to kill basically 2 or 3 Marines while I'm not shooting. That's the point. And we don't need me to duplicate the failure, just the victory. And the next game, I saw this one on stream, and it was pretty obvious that the big problem in this game came at exactly the 14-minute mark, where, like I said before, when you save up mules and then drop them all at once, you end up with too much money and you can't spend it on the buildings that you have, which used to be keeping up before you drop the mules with your non-mule income, but all of a sudden when you drop 4 or 6 mules, your income is so much bigger that you just need so many more buildings to be able to handle it, but you all of a sudden need more buildings, and then when the mules expire, you no longer need them. So there's 2 problems that can be caused by that. First is that you just don't have enough buildings, so you bank a ton of money, and second is that because your income is so huge for a very short time, you think that you need more buildings, and then you make a bunch of them, and then as soon as the mules expire, you can't use those buildings. So you can either over or under produce. Wow, four spines. This is a great opening for you. And when I watched the stream, it was pretty clear that you were very far ahead after this. So he does have a bigger income right now, but you're going to take almost an immediate 3rd base, which is great. I watched some other TVCs of yours where you'd make the 3rd command center and then just be too shy to take the 3rd base. But always take it early, and if you're forced to run it away, so be it, man. It's not a big deal. So getting this 12-minute 3rd is great for you. So a second ago you were on 1 base, and now you're on 3. So a second ago you had 3 racks, a starport, and a factory, which is, as we know from our TVP experience, exactly enough infrastructure to support 1 base economy. Right? Okay, actually I have 4 racks. So now that you're on 3 base economy, your income jumps up to like 2.5K. And just doing some simple math, each building is either 500 or 250. This is 500, this is 500, this is 250, 250, 250, 250. Right? So your total, like, if you keep constantly producing units off all of your buildings, you're going to have 1,000, 2,000. $2,000. And your income is 2,700. Especially once you drop mules. It's up here at 2,500. So you just have a bigger income than you have in infrastructure. And it's not by a huge margin. It's not the end of the world. But you need, when you get a 3rd base, you just need to throw down more more buildings. So right now is when you're about to lose the whole game. You're pushing this army into a perfect position, pre-spread, really good. This is a great engagement over here. But while you're doing this engagement, just after you doubled your income, you just got more money than you can spend. And on top of having more money than you can spend, you're not spending it. I watched you while you were microing these guys. You tab over, make 5 Marines, and then tab back to your army and keep fighting. Tab over, make 5 Marines, and tab back. And you have the capacity to make 7 Marines, not 5. And you should always double queue when you're fighting, because you know that when you're fighting it's impossible to remember to go back in macro. So you should be queuing up like 15 Marines each time you tab over. And on top of that, you left the factory and the starport idle, and that's a really big deal, because you have only barely enough infrastructure to spend all your gas if you remember to spend it. But if you leave these buildings idle, then your gas is going to pile up, and there's no way to eat into that gas pile, because when you go infantry, you don't want to like say, oh, my gas is really high, let me make 10 Thors. You don't want any Thors. You know, you maybe want a couple of tanks, but you don't want a ton of them. And you just need to consistently 2 at a time be making medevacs. You don't want to make 10 at once or something like that. So you can't ever let your gas get high. Always, when you macro with a bio play, first you spend your gas, then you just hold down the A button. Spend your gas, hold down the A button. And if you notice that after holding down the A button, the number of pips you have in a racks gets up to like 6, then say, well, I need more racks. But don't worry about trying to build exactly the right number of Marines or any of that stuff while you're fighting. Also, mule energy gets high, so not only are you banking a bunch of stuff, but you're banking mule energy, so when you drop those, it's going to be even bigger of a deal. So you go from right at 14 minutes, your bank is almost 0, right? You got practically no bank. Everything's looking good. You're spending your money as quickly as you get it. You got a huge income, but a huge infrastructure that's making lots of cool stuff. And then from 14 to 15 minutes, this next 1 minute, we can look at these and say, oh, these are all idle, basically. Like the starport's been idle the entire time. The raxes are just barely being populated by not nearly enough stuff. The factory is mostly idle the whole time. Armory is idle. Raxes are completely idle. Factory's idle. Starport's idle. Raxes are idle. Okay, finally you go back and you say, okay, I've been forgetting to macro, let me macro. It's been 2 minutes now, and you've had a $2,500 income for 2 minutes, which is $5,000. On top of that, you've saved up a ton of mule energy, right? He did deny this base, which sucks, but you rebuilt this CC. I think you're going to actually forget to use this CC for a long time. So anyway, the fighting is over. You have time to macro, and you say, okay, well, good. I have time to macro. Let me queue up a bunch of buildings. You don't grab these reinforcements and join them with your army. You don't say, okay, after queuing up a bunch of Marines and Hellions and medevacs, how much money do I have and should I build more units? That's something you really need to do. So you have $3,000 in the bank, tons of mule energy in the bank, another base about to go down. You don't pre-clear this base or float this base. There's a lot of things macro-wise that you need to be doing, and instead of doing them, you're kind of moving this little tiny army around and paying attention to it. Like, you have this huge army here, man. Don't be watching that little tiny army when there's a giant army back in your base. So here comes some mutas that kill some workers and pre-spread, but the money that you've built up, especially the mule energy that you've built up, is never really going to get depleted. And from that moment on, from 15 minutes on, you're just never going to get down to 0 cash again. So it feels to me like you're pinned in your base here. You're hitting 200 unit space, and you're capping out your money. You're capping out your bank because you're at 200 U and you don't feel like you can attack. But it's 200 U against 130. Like, I mean, you're way ahead. You could win this game right now. And again, you're keeping your army in multiple, like, you're forgetting to hotkey your reinforcements, basically. You have a 200 unit space army. There's no excuse for you to lose this stuff. There's no excuse for you to not be attacking. And this happened in the game that I live coached you against one of your friends, right? You hit 200 U, and you have 10 things on your list of what you need to do for macro, and you need to attack right now because you're at 200 U. And you just don't have the time or the wherewithal, the practice, the experience as a StarCraft player to be able to do them all at once. So you pick one thing and do it, then pick another thing and then do it, and then pick another thing and then do it, and then your bank is 7K. You know, like it's not an APM problem. Your APM is exactly as high as mine. It's not like you don't have the APM to do what you need to do. It's that you just don't have, I don't know, you don't have the experience to do it or something. But clearly, since this is a really consistent problem, what's happening is that your list, you know how everyone has a list that they go through, you know, first I make sure that I got workers, then I make sure I got supply depots, then I make sure that I float any CCs that have been made, then I go back to the beginning. After doing the beginning again, I make sure that I've queued up all my units in my buildings, and I go back to the beginning. After I've done all those things, I look and say, hey, do I still have money? If so, spend all my money on additional buildings. Okay, go back to the beginning, and then if I get all the way back to that point, and I don't have any money now, use my army. Right? You got to go in that sort of loop. But the problem is that if you can't get through the loop fast enough, there's this temptation to just use your army when you're not done with the loop. Especially if he attacks you. And you're like, okay, well, there may be a bunch of things left on my to-do list, but he's attacking me right now, so I have to use my army right now. And then your to-do list just never gets to done. You know, like right now your infrastructure is this. This is, let's see, you've got a 3.5k income, which I should add is really good. That's great. And this is 2k plus 1k. This is about a 3k infrastructure. I guess your infrastructure is fine. It's just that you're maxed out. So that's good. It's good to know. I thought that there was a big infrastructure problem, but there isn't. Obviously, because you're maxed out and you're banking a bunch of stuff, you want to be overproducing infrastructure, and you're not. But at least you're on par with what you need to have infrastructure-wise. So to even be fighting with this army when you've got this much stuff back home is silly. To respond to 8 mutas with 200 unit space of mutas, Marines is completely silly. You should take about 16 Marines and go respond to those mutas while the rest of your Marines do something productive. But notice, like, when you first maxed out, it was 130 supply for him. And you're maxed. Like, you win the game at that point. And he does these little dinky things to convince you that you need to not attack him, and you just... it's so frustrating. Like, this must be frustrating for you, too, to know that you had this game basically won, and because you were afraid of 8 mutas, like, this is 8 mutas! Look how many Marines you have running around chasing 8 mutas. You only need 8 Marines. Like, your Marines are 2-2, his mutas are 0-0. Your Marines are badass against those mutas. You can totally shut them down with like 16, maybe 8 Marines. You don't need your whole army to be chasing around mutas. Anyway, later on in the game, and you lost the game in 15 minutes when you started building up that bank and never attacked. That was the most crucial thing. That was the end of the game, basically. But the big mistakes you made after the game was already over, like, oh my god, look at that 146 supply against 200U, was not securing this right side. And why did you not secure the right side? Again, it's because you have things on your to-do list, and you pick one and you leave the other ones off, and that's a good skill to build in the early game when you're trying to make sure that you macro perfectly, is not getting too caught up with stupid things like scouting or pre-spreading your army when you haven't built SCVs. But then you keep coming and responding to mutas with 200 guys and stimming your whole freaking 200 unit space Marine army against those mutas. It's just silly. Put 8 Marines here and he'll never be able to touch it again. Put 8 Marines here, 8 Marines here, 8 Marines here, and 8 Marines here, and suddenly the rest of your army is free to go fight. Or, you know, put 4 in each spot, and when he comes with mutas, pull 2 spots together and whatever. So these mutas are not as scary as you think they are. Like, look, this is 12 Marines and you scared the mutas away. Like, that's all it takes to scare away mutas. And your army is just sitting in the middle of the field during that muta harass. Like, what the hell, you know? So one of the things, you never have to micro anti-muta stuff. Like, you got turrets everywhere. He's not going to want to stand still. So wherever his mutas are, if he gets to a place where there's no turrets, you can just stim the Marines and send them there, and then go micro your army. You don't need to watch the Marines. The mutas will run away from the Marines. You don't need to watch to make sure that happens. Look at how big your bank is. Like, you have the right number of buildings to support your 3K income, but because you've been at 200 unit space for so long, your bank is ridiculous. And that also kind of is misleading to have such a ridiculous bank, because your income is not really ridiculous anymore. You've still got the 77 workers, but instead of the 3.5k income you had with 77 workers before, you're getting pretty low because you've mined out 2 of the 4 bases, and you're not taking new bases, and you're not even pre-clearing them. Like, look at the minimap. You have never looked at this base ever with any units. Like, again, when you have 90 Marines, they don't need to be in a 90 Marine ball. Send 1 Marine up here and patrol him up here, and he'll keep all 3 of these bases cleared until a Zergling comes and kill him. And then you do it again. Send 1 Marine and patrol him up here. And he'll keep those bases clear so that when you want to take them, you can take them. When are you going to want to take those, by the way? Every time the chick says a mineral patch has been depleted, or whatever it is she says, make a CC and get ready to take a new base, because you still have the same number of workers, but now you have fewer mineral patches to mine from, so you're going to need to take a base. Also, when your army is pure Marine medevac, you need to be attacking in multiple places at once, because it's really hard to spread 80 Marines, but it's really easy to spread 20. So if you take 20 Marines, click 2 medevacs onto them, so the medevacs follow them wherever they go, and then just send them over here. And then you keep the other, 80-something Marines together and go pick a fight, but while that fight's going on, he needs to choose whether to respond to this or both. And if he tries to split his army, he might split it wrong and fail to defend one of those 2 places. And if he doesn't split his army, one of those 2 places is going undefended, and that's great. So multi-pronged nonsense, both for defense and for offense with your Marines. On top of not forgetting about huge groups of Marines in your bases. When you defend against mutas by leaving a bunch of Marines somewhere, your goal is to leave those Marines there until you have enough turrets so that the Marines can go rejoin your army. In this case, you have tons and tons of turrets. You don't really need the Marines up there anymore. And if you feel like you don't have enough turrets, so you do need to leave the Marines there, make more turrets. You have 8k, 6k, so this is... Oh, it's hard to explain, but you get it, right? Your bank shouldn't be this big. That's the general point here. So he finally gets to 200U after like 3 hours and just mops the floor with you the second he hits 200U. And after you, like, while this fight is going on, if you've pre-spread your Marines, there's often nothing you can do to make the fight go better for you. So you want to be at least looking at the fight and queuing up units, if not looking away to figure out what you need to do back home. But you're no longer at 200U, and yet you're not making units. You're no longer at 200U, and yet you're not making units. And now you lose your whole army, and yet you're not making units. You know, you made 8 Marines. You know? So when your bank is big enough so that you can completely fill all of your Raxes without eating into the whole bank, you should completely fill all of your Raxes without eating into your bank, because it's so much quicker to hold down the A button than it is to try to specifically count out, 26 A clicks. It's like A, is that 26? Yeah, A. That's stupid. Just hold it down. It'll fill your Raxes. You'll still have 6k in the bank. No big deal. So yeah, your macro right here is really crucial. Like, when you see a Terran going bio beat a Zerg, it's because he'll lose his whole army, but his supply will stay at 200U. And because he's holding down the A key while he loses those units, your supply needs to always stay at 200U. You need to have enough Raxes so that you can instantly remax. And it's like a double-edged sword here, because yes, with this much bank you should have a lot more Raxes, but you haven't secured additional bases. So if you did have a bunch more Raxes, you would just deplete this not replenishing bank so much quicker. Like, you're basically on one base mining right now because you're not mining here for some reason, and you're only partially mining here, and you're basically not mining anywhere else. So your income is tiny at this point. And you finally, after 28 minutes, recognize that, hey, maybe at some point I need more than 4 bases, but this is way too late. First of all, you should have had, like I said, 1 Marine patrolling to make sure that no poop could happen here. all game long. Even if you're not going to take those bases, do that just so that he thinks that you might have them. Like right now, he knows you don't have those bases, so even though he's way behind, he feels confident that at least he has a chance of winning because you're limited to 4 bases. You know? If he doesn't know how many bases you have, he might assume you have 6 bases and just leave the game. That's happened to me lots of times. So, again, you're basically not mining, and it's easy to fall into this trap where you have 80 workers and infinity money and just assume that that's good enough without actually mining, but you do need to mine. Mining is pretty crucial. 62 workers, 1k income, that's pathetic and ridiculous. That battle right there was silly in and of itself. Like, you had basically 10 Marines and 200 medevacs. What? Like, why are there so many medevacs? This requires 1 medevac if you're going to put 10 Marines over here. Don't put all your medevacs on a bunch of naked Marines. But on top of that, you have 200U. Why isn't 200U of your crap with your army? Also, there's a bunch of Marines standing next to an Overlord and they're not killing it. This base is done yet not morphing. This base is done yet you still haven't cleared this pooping Overlord. It's getting kind of silly. And it's funny to, like, obviously all of these things are, I just don't have the APM to keep up with all the things I need to do. But your APM, again, is higher than mine. So it's not so much that you don't have the APM to keep up, it's that you're spending it all in one place at once. You know, you'll go to a place, sit there and do 85 actions for a minute, and then go somewhere else and do 85 actions over the course of a minute, and then go somewhere else, and then, you know, like, instead of 1 action here, 1 action there, 1 action here, 1 action there, 1 action here, 1 action there, like you're supposed to be doing, like, I'm camera locking on you, you're staring at your Marines forever, like, still looking at these Marines. Now I'm gonna... did you see how long it took? Your camera is still looking at this. Like, to clear an Overlord? Oh, sorry. This is just one example out of obviously the whole game. What is your camera doing over here? Okay. So, you want to clear that Overlord. You click the mini-map, grab 1 Marine, A-click to where the ramp is, and you're done. So right now you should be done. You should look away right now. Let's count how many seconds you stay here without looking away. 7 seconds. Like, that's just 7 wasted seconds where nothing useful is happening. Also, you should be able to grab this dude, put him here, patrol on the minimap without even looking at those places, and then grab the rest of your army and rejoin your troops all in about, you know, 3 seconds. It's just... there's like a quickness that's not related to... I mean, it's, you know that you can do it because you're doing enough things. You're just not switching between screens quick enough, I think. Anyway, kind of belaboring that point because I can't figure out how to say it with English words. Whew. Okay.
Upgrade complete.
So, like, are you watching this with me right now? How long should it have taken for that action to happen? Like, that was just probably a full game minute to make 8 command centers. How long should making 8 command centers be? Right? You grab a bunch of workers and you go CC. It should take about 7 game seconds, not a full minute. So just getting quicker at doing everything that you do, man, will really help a lot. I do feel like you know what needs to be done and you just don't have the time to do it. And it's not because there's not enough time in the world, it's because each thing that you do is taking longer than it needs to take. And this especially shows its wicked head at about 14 minutes in every game. You always have the best early game, and you put yourself in such a hugely advantageous position. Like in this game, it was 200U against 130U, and you had better upgrades than him, and you could have won right there. And then the game just kind of falls apart because you can't play the late game. You're just really bad at the late game. So another thing worth mentioning, Bio Medevac versus Zerg is all about suicidal aggression. If you ever hit 200 supply, you basically lose. You need to be getting a bunch of Marines, suiciding, getting a bunch of Marines and suiciding. If you watch, like, I was just watching a Muslim stream. Let's see if it's still open. History. The Muslim stream. If you watch anyone else play, but I'll just pick the Muslim as an example because I was just watching his game. But notice, like, I'm not saying you should play like the Muslim, but notice how often he goes back to his reinforcement points, grabs his Marines, and attacks. Like, he just made 2 Marauders and 3 Marines, and he's attacking with them. You know, and then a couple seconds later, he just made, 8 Marines and 2 Marauders, and he's going to attack with them. Like, just because he has a small army, that's no excuse to wait for more army. You attack and you attack and you attack and you attack, and that's just how Bio works against Zerg, because a 200 unit space Bio army will lose 100% of the time against Zerg. But a teeny tiny army, look at that. He's got 1 round of production, and he's going to grab them and attack with them. So he's not waiting for 2 or 3 rounds of production. Like, you noticed in the game that you played, every time you grabbed your reinforcements and joined them with your army, it was like 200 unit space of reinforcements almost. So every wave of reinforcements, you need to grab it and join it with your army and attack. Like, every time a wave of reinforcement comes out, you need to be grabbing it. So yeah, dude. In contrast, at I would say 15 minutes, we can watch your reinforcements. This is already too many, but watch how many you're going to get before you ever grab them. This is way too many, way too many. Look at this. Like, you're basically building an entire game's worth of army here and never joining them with your army. So, like, this is a lot of units not doing anything. So finally, after 3 minutes of making reinforcements, you finally grab them and do something with them. But if you're going to be going pure bio against Zerg, your rally point needs to be near your army but far enough back so that it's safe, and every 35 seconds or at 25 seconds when your Marines come out, you need to be grabbing them. Every single time they pop, you grab them and join them with your army, and grab them and join them with your army. And that doesn't leave a lot of extra time for clearing expansions, expanding, making racks, making supply depots, making turrets. So you've got to get really quick at doing those other things so that you can do them in the 1 or 2 second gaps between when you move your army to the left and when you move it back to the right, you know? So making 3 turrets should be grab, turret, 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 look away. You know? It should take almost no time whatsoever. And making additional racks, again, grab, rack, racks, look away. So it's just trying to squeeze things into, like, this is why I don't think you should be going bio, is because if you need to grab your reinforcements every 25 seconds and attack, that means you have a 25-second periodicity during which you can do other things, right? So 25 seconds, grab your dudes, tell them where to attack, and then do other stuff. And then once it's been 25 seconds, you have to grab your dudes and tell them where to attack, and then do other stuff. And then once it's been 25 seconds, you have to grab your dudes and tell them where to attack. And if it takes you the full 25 seconds to grab your dudes and tell them where to attack, you're never going to do anything else ever. You're just constantly going to be grabbing dudes and telling them where to attack, and grabbing dudes and telling them where to attack, and you won't have the free time to expand or clear expansions or any of that other stuff. So I don't think bio is beyond your capabilities overall. I just think right now, until you get really quick at building buildings and clearing expansions and stuff, it's too ambitious because you're just not attacking often enough, and then you end up with this giant. This bio ball is not something that can be microed easily. There's too many Marines here. You can't spread them in less than 30 seconds. You know, you need to be going with 16 Marines. Making 16 more, going with those 16, making 16 more, going with those 16. It needs to be tiny armies constantly attacking, and the constantly attacking piece didn't happen, and the tiny armies piece, for the same reason, doesn't happen. So, anyway, one of the ways that I make it, because I have the same problem, right? If I'm doing a biocentric TVZ, I don't have the free time to go build other units. So what I do is I get up to 200 unit space of supply depots, get up to 8 racks, finish 2-2. Patrol a Marine on the expansions to keep it clear, and then I go into my constant suicidal bioaggression, where I don't have anything else to do because now I'm on this suicidal aggression phase where there is no building required. I'm no longer ever going to make another building. I'm just constantly microing my army over and over and over and over and over. So that's one way that you can make up for the fact that it's too slow for you to make buildings and stuff. Is just make them before you start the fight. But anyway. There's these 2 competing sides of the pendulum. Like, you need to attack before you're at 200 U, but you also need to do all these buildings before you attack. And if if you can't do both of those together, bios just won't work. Anyway, this is enough harping on this one game. I think you already understood it before I started, so whatever.